the liquidity issue, Andre, I wanted to ask you about because we try to be balanced here, right? So there are positives, but what's the negative that you potentially see in terms of that same liquidity issue? Because some persons are concerned based on how liquid the stock is, that in terms of if let's say a large shareholder decides to sell, what could that mean for the price?
So I mean, if from a technical standpoint, if you're to assess the Q, some stocks, especially now when the sentiment or equity sentiment isn't as best as it used to be, or as in terms of what it was recently. Um, I think it's different for Trans Jamaica, meaning if you assess the queues, there's a large number of bids, large number of offers. The shares are actively trading hands. So I think that actually, would facilitate or allow investors like great price discovery in terms of multiple buyers, multiple sellers, and all of that. And then it's also not only is it on the J dollar side, but it's also across the stocks. I mean, what you're seeing on the J dollar side tells only a part of the story. There's also the US dollar side, for those who hold the stock in J dollar or seeking to like in terms of trading the currency. That's an avenue that some traders would assess and would consider. So I think given that the queue is a bit healthy, it's vibrant, a lot of buyers, a lot of sellers. I think that's definitely a plus. So it's more readily tradable as opposed to illiquid stocks where sometimes warrant large sell downs or things like that because they're so illiquid, not much buyers on the bid side and so forth. Which is sometimes a turn off to investors, especially when they're looking to deploy a certain or a relatively large amount of capital in terms of an equity investment.
Okay. All right. Cool. So what's your next pick?
So my next pick, I'd probably go with Jamaica Broilers. It's a stock that I've been watching, for the longest while.
You mentioned that a couple of times
Yeah,
over the last year and a half. Yep.
yeah. We in it for the long haul. So the price, it's I believe it's now at the 33 region. It would have probably been at a high of around 37.
Mhm.
Um, so essentially, on the graph that you're showing there, it probably shows a little downward trend. I think that's over the 3 month period. But essentially, the earnings tells a different story, where the
Yeah.
earnings has essentially been on an upward trajectory. I believe it's since recently where they've actually um, broken the mark where they've started to consistently generate a billion in net profit on a quarterly basis. Um, so looking at the earnings for the most recent quarter being the quarter ended July 2023. Revenues they reported a modest growth in revenue, 22.9 in July 2022 compared to 23.4 for July 2023. If you're looking at profit now, in terms of the net profit, the profit would have amounted to 1.2 billion compared to approximately 1.1. So it's 1 billion 68 million for the same
Yeah.
period back in July 2022. And if you look at the net profit that's actually attributable to the stockholders of the company, it's the 1.2 billion compared to 1.1, which I believe would be associated with the at the time would have been associated with the Haiti operations. So they financially they're performing well. We all know what the product is. It's chicken, it's eggs. Consumer staple products. Things that you know um, essentially inelastic, meaning there's any price change will likely not result in any material change in demand. During when there were supply chain issues, they were impacted by the narrowing or a reduction in terms of the margins, but despite that, they still were generating higher profits against the backdrop of higher revenues. And now, when essentially the supply chain disruptions have somewhat eased, we've seen where the margin has actually started to strengthen and return back to in line with the historic mean. Um, so for 2020 for 2021 the margin was 25.7, and then it contracted to 23.8 for 2022, which was essentially the year when supply chains disruptions would have peaked. And up to 2023, the gross profit margin has since expanded to 25.6%. Likewise, the gross profit margin of around 4.7% compares to 4.1% back in 2021. So, I mean, if you're taking a deeper dive now at the company's operations, they've exited Haiti. For the longest while, Haiti was a loss maker for the company's overall operations. So, that has since been excluded or no longer uh, um, a drawdown for them, so to speak. But in terms of the company's um, US operations, I think that's essentially the segment that's to be commended. The profit for the most recent quarter was roughly 1.2 million US in terms of the segment result, and that would compare to 814 million. So as you can see, it's essentially, I believe, almost 50% increase in terms of the segment result, or in terms of the profit from that result from that segment. Um, I believe revenues would have declined marginally for that quarter, and essentially the company attributed that to a reduction or a stabilization of I believe it's egg prices. um, yeah, stay falling prices in terms of the companies in most of the company's product lines. But however, because of higher poultry volumes, they were essentially able to remain profitable or increase their profitability. And then when you're looking at the price multiple of JBG against a market average PE of about main market, which would be 14.9 times, Jamaica Broilers PE is actually coming in at, I believe it's 8.7 times. So as you can see, it's a steep discount compared to the broader main market. So that's one of the reasons I'm watching JBG. You know, it's a dividend paying stock, albeit I guess relatively low compared to prevailing interest rates, compared to a Transjam. But nonetheless, it's a strong company fundamentally speaking. Attractive multiple, properly run, continues to do well. So that's my second stock that I'm watching.
Um, I do like Jamaica Broilers as well. I have for a while. I think for me, I mean, the dividend was never an issue. I think, I mean, because as you know, the yield comes down to the price that you paid for the stock.
Yeah,
So I mean, if you can, but it's one of those stocks, of course, depending on when you started investing, $30 per share. Because this is what I say to people, right? If you're investing for dividends, then it has to be about volume for you, right? Because the more volume you have, the more cash you get back in terms of dividends,
yeah,
right? Because 42 cents is not bad, but if you have to pay $30 per share to get 40 cents, again, it's gonna make Trans Jamaica look, ridiculously better in terms of a yield there. But I do think with them cutting the operations in Haiti, and I mean they're them being able to grow, and I've always seen it as a company that has an opportunity to grow because of the product itself, right? You could potentially sell that in every market in the world. So it's really just now to get those partnerships, and the way that they've been growing the business seems interesting. So I think the year that they're positioned for is actually a good one. Whether or not the market will respond is not up to them. But um, I see your pick, so I'll leave it. I'll leave it at that. I'll
yeah.
leave it at that.
I mean, as I said, just to add to that, yeah, as I said, like it, in terms of the performance of the poultry division in the US, and I mean, look, using the trend in the stock price, as any indication of the market sentiment towards the stock. I'm seeing where essentially on a year-to-date basis, it's one of the few stocks, the few JSE listed stocks that would probably be up on a year-to-date basis.
I mean, 4%, but still up. Still up. I
It's
get you.
still
I get
it's still up, and then I believe that the
yeah.
figure will be actually even greater over the last 12 months. They
Yeah,
are
let me check that. I use sticker to check that.
probably in the region
But
of about 14% over the last year. Um, my rough estimates would show dividend yield of around 2.3%. And I
yeah,
mean,
what it's up 13% in the last year, in the last
yeah,
12 months. That's not bad.
yeah. Against the backdrop of the broader index have been consistently declining, and especially most stocks declining. I think their
Yeah.
performance shows you know the sentiment towards the stock, and you know how factoring in the outlook, as well as just how they've been performing so far. Um,
Okay.